Good evening. Welcome to Love World USA News. I'm Barbara Sam. First, a quick look at the top stories this evening. Pastor Chris warns against plan to restrict the preaching of the gospel in public. Federal Trade Court upholds Trump tariffs in initial ruling. New Mexico Supreme Court bans former judge following arrest of alleged gang members at his home. Virginia Town Council reinstates police department following public opposition. Treasury Secretary signals U.S.-China tariff deal possible if Beijing rebalances economy. And now to the news. The second day of the April edition of the Global Fasting and Prayer with Pastor Chris Oyakhilome, DSC, DSCDD, marked a significant shift in world affairs as the prophet to the nations led a focused session of prayer for the nations. Through the program, with billions of participants from across the world, he continued his emphasis on spiritual alertness and intercessions for global affairs. During the session, while calling for the church to pray for Christians around the world, Pastor Chris divulged a failing satanic plan to break the church by replacing the use of the word church. He also brought the world's attention to what he described as an emerging plan to suppress the public preaching of the gospel and restrict the signing or singing of Christian worship music to the church premises. He urged believers to remain vigilant and prayerful in light of these developments. In addressing the United Kingdom specifically, Pastor Chris declared with conviction that the government of the UK is not in the hands of Satan. He encouraged Christians not to fear, but to boldly affirm that the gospel of Jesus Christ will continue to thrive and spread across the nation. The program, known for its prophetic insights and international prayer focus, continues to mobilize Christians to take a spiritual stand in defense of religious liberty and the advancement of the gospel worldwide. The program will wrap off tomorrow with day 3 of the global prayer and fasting. Let's take a look.
Such as communities of faith instead of church. So church is somehow too religious. Well, Jesus said, I'll build my church. Didn't say I'll build my communities. I understand where they're coming from. Of course, you can break down the terminology in the Greek and in the Hebrew, and you come to assembly. But still, you come to the called out ones. And church was the best word to describe the meaning of the words. Not community. But we have to understand what they're really after. It's not so much as the nomenclature. It is the dissolution of the church. That's what they actually want. They think that if they can somehow push us far enough and long enough, then somehow we will mingle into the world and into the dispassion, and they will not find us again. But they're making a mistake. They're so wrong. Not only are they dropping the word church, the parliamentarians, spearheaded by the Labour government, is outlawing public preaching and you can't say God bless you to someone who's offended by it. You get into trouble for that. You're not allowed to sing church songs outside the church grounds. Now, you say this openly, they'll try to deny it because they know that this is unpopular. But these are the things they've already planned and already using. And we're talking about a police institution. The police institution in the United Kingdom is bedeviled by demons. This is witchcraft in operation. And that's why we have to pray. Because the police is being used and they claim it's the law. They're not going to let...
The U.S. Court of International Trade has denied a motion to block President Donald Trump's recently imposed tariffs, ruling that plaintiffs failed to demonstrate immediate and irreparable harm. The request was brought by the Liberty Justice Center on behalf of 4 small businesses affected by the new import taxes. The plaintiffs had argued that the tariffs announced as part of Trump's Liberation Day economic plan would severely disrupt their operations and supply chains. They also claimed the administration exceeded its legal authority by using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as the IEEPA, to justify the sweeping trade measures. Despite the legal challenges, the trade court left the tariffs in place while broader questions about the legality of the policy continues to be litigated. The court instructed both parties to submit further documentation and scheduled a hearing on May 13th to consider a preliminary injunction. This interim ruling marks a legal victory for the Trump administration, which has pursued an aggressive trade policy against multiple foreign nations. The administration faces several ongoing lawsuits challenging its recent executive actions, including immigration restrictions and government agency reforms. Let's take a look.
We have a lot of action going on. We're making a lot of money, this country. This country is not going to be losing money on trade anymore. Every country wants to partake. Even countries that have ripped us off for many, many years. China is an example, but it's not just China. European Union, they ripped us off for many, many years, and those days are over. We're going to make a lot of money for our people. We'll be able to lower taxes substantially, and we're going to be proud of ourselves.
The New Mexico Supreme Court has permanently barred Judge Joe Cano from holding any judicial office in the state after an alleged gang member of the Venezuelan Tren de Agra gang was arrested at Cano's residence earlier this year. The court's ruling prohibited Cano from seeking or serving in any judicial capacity, including ceremonial roles such as officiating weddings. Cano, who served at the Dona Ana County Magistrate Court in Las Cruces, submitted a resignation letter dated March 3rd, though it was not formally received by judicial authorities until March 31st. His resignation became effective March 21st. The state Supreme Court subsequently canceled a scheduled disciplinary hearing following resolution of the matter. The investigation, led by Homeland Security Investigations in Las Cruces, began in January and focused on Christian Ortega Lopez, a Venezuelan national suspected of affiliation with Tren de Agra gang, according to federal court filings. Ortega Lopez was described as an illegal alien living with other undocumented individuals and in possession of firearms at the time of the arrest. The case has raised questions about judicial accountability and national security concerns involving illegal gang activity. Authorities have not disclosed whether Cano faces any criminal charges, but his judicial career in New Mexico has now been formally terminated. Watch this.
At first glance, the videos and photos tell a story of a family that loved guns. But who they shared those guns and their home with came as a shock to local authorities. The homeowner, Joel Cano, a Democratic judge in Doña Ana County, New Mexico, who resigned last month following a raid on his home, in which Christian Ortega Lopez was arrested, charged with being in the country illegally and possessing a firearm.
This judge's daughter is allowing this illegal alien to have access to firearms, which is unlawful under 18 U.S.C. 922G. It is a felony for this illegal alien to be in possession of firearms.
Court documents reveal he entered the country unlawfully in December 2023, and a few months later had been hired by the judge's wife, Nancy, who later offered him a place to stay in her residence that she shared with her husband. But most shocking, Homeland Security officials say Ortega Lopez displayed clear indicators of his association with the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, or TDA. Not just his clothing or tattoos, but voicemails and text messages they say provide significant evidence for their case against him. One reason they ask that he remain behind bars.
Doña Ana County has been a hotbed of illegal immigration and drug trafficking, human smuggling for many, many years. And to see that a judge would allow this to happen, it's very concerning.
The news will be back after this break.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. We are finally putting America first. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. More production at home will mean stronger competition at lower prices. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart. This will be indeed the golden age of America.
Welcome back. The Town Council of Purcellville, Virginia, voted on Tuesday to retain its police department after widespread public backlash. The council had previously considered disbanding the department to save approximately $3.2 million in response to a broader $50 million municipal deficit tied to wastewater infrastructure spending. The proposal drew sharp criticism from residents and led to petitions for the recall of several council members, including Vice Mayor Ben Nett. It was argued the decision was made without adequate public input and expressed concerns over relying solely on the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office for local law enforcement. The Loudoun County Sheriff, Mike Chapman, issued a statement before the vote highlighting that no coordination had taken place with his office and warned that a transition would not be feasible within the proposed timeline. Vice Mayor Nett, who had recently been dismissed from the police department and voted for its elimination, was absent from the meeting amid a criminal investigation into potential conflicts of interest. Following the reversal, residents at the meeting applauded the decision to fully fund the department for 2026. The council's earlier actions and internal appointments, including the hiring of a former mayor as town manager without interviewing other candidates, have raised additional concerns about transparency and governance within the local government. Let's take a look.
To scrap the force just a couple of weeks ago, they were trying to cut costs, but tonight every council member present voted to fully fund that police department through fiscal year 2026. The mayor, Christopher Berteau, abstained.
All right, so not voting tonight was Vice Mayor Carl Bennett. So we learned earlier today, Nett is now under criminal investigation by Virginia State Police involving possible conflict of interest. That's because in addition to being vice mayor, Nett was until recently a Percival police officer. According to Loudoun County Commonwealth's attorney Bob Anderson, Nett was fired from the force a few days ago amid allegations of dishonesty.
Anderson says days after being fired, Nett voted as a member of the town council to eliminate the police department. Anderson calls that vote an apparent act of retaliation.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced Wednesday that the United States is open to a major trade agreement with China, contingent on China shifting its economic focus from export-led manufacturing to domestic consumption. Speaking at the Institute of International Finance during the IMF and World Bank spring meetings, Bessent emphasized that both countries need economic rebalancing and that mutual cooperation could create global stability. Bessent criticized China's current model of export overcapacity, stating it harms global markets and creates long-term imbalances. He called on China to adopt policies supporting internal demand and suggested that such changes could facilitate a reduction in the U.S.'s steep 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. President Trump, who imposed the tariffs, has indicated they may be significantly reduced if negotiations proceed. The Treasury Secretary also urged international financial institutions to hold China accountable for what he described as distortionary trade and currency practices. He called on the IMF to address these issues and advocate for the World Bank to stop treating China as a developing economy eligible for loans. The Trump administration's trade team is reportedly preparing for negotiations, aiming to align trade terms with national interests. The administration maintains that China's economic practices must change if it is to take on a greater role in the global financial system. Watch this.
China obviously is an important part of this administration's foreign and economic policy. You'll be meeting with your Chinese counterparts. What will you tell them in the sense of how they obviously are aware that there's huge imbalances, their manufacturing capacity is enormous, especially in things like automobiles. How will you help them understand that it's not just about talking, it's about executing?
Well, look, I don't think I have to help them understand. I think they understand very well. And it's just a matter of impetus and will. So I believe I first went to Japan in 1990, 91, within 12 months of the peak of the bubble. A decade of that unwind, a decade of malaise. And then in 2012, I ran across a fellow, 2011, he was running for prime minister named Shinzo Abe, and he knew that Japan needed change and implemented it very quickly. 10 years later, more than 10 years later, Japan has had a remarkable economic run. And I think that our Chinese counterparts that will come to this realization, and if some of our policies, sometimes it takes an external push.
Right.
Alternative.
Tesla has reported a 9% year-over-year decline in overall revenue for the first quarter of 2025, totaling $19.3 billion. Automotive revenue fell to $13.97 billion, down nearly 20% from the same period last year. The drop was attributed to reduced vehicle deliveries, pricing adjustments, and production changes related to the Model Y. CEO Elon Musk stated during the earnings call that his involvement with the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, would drop significantly. DOGE, a policy initiative launched under the Trump administration, has drawn both media attention and public protests in recent months. Tesla delivered 323,000 vehicles in Q1 compared to 386,000 deliveries a year earlier. While automotive sales declined, Tesla's energy generation and storage segment grew 67% year over year to $2.73 billion, and its services revenue rose 15% to $2.64 billion. Despite those gains, net income dropped to $409 million, with earnings per share falling to 0.27% or 0.27 cents. The company cited global trade policy uncertainty and shifting political sentiment as factors affecting supply chains, cost, and demand. Tesla's outlook remains cautious, though it confirmed plans to begin production on new, more affordable vehicles in the first half of the year. Indian authorities have intensified security operations across Jammu and Kashmir following a coordinated attack on Tuesday that killed at least 26 individuals, the majority being Indian tourists. The attack took place in the popular resort town of Pahalgam. In response, tens of thousands of police and soldiers were deployed throughout the region, with roadblocks and vehicle checks and aerial surveillance launched to find those responsible. Officials confirmed that 24 of the victims were Indian nationals, with one from Nepal and another identified as a local tour guide. At least 17 others sustained injuries. Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and Home Minister Amit Shah both commended the killings, pledging to pursue not only the attackers but also those who supported or planned the assault. Shah visited the site and met with victims' family, promising severe consequences for the perpetrators. Responsibility for the attacks was claimed on social media by a previously unknown group calling itself Kashmir Resistance. The group alleged the victims were affiliated with Indian security forces, though those claims remain unverified. Meanwhile, Indian media outlets and several officials suggested Pakistani involvement, a frequent accusation in the region's long-standing conflict, though no direct evidence has been presented. The attack comes amid an ongoing push by New Delhi to encourage tourism in Kashmir after the revocation of the region's special status in 2019. Despite this push, the region remains heavily militarized. The border conflict between India and Pakistan over Kashmir continues, with both nations claiming the territory. Thousands of civilians and security personnel have died since the insurgency began in 1989. A court in Ivory Coast has disqualified Tidjane Tahim, the former CEO of Credit Suisse, from running for president due to his dual Ivorian French nationality. The decision came after a legal challenge questioned his eligibility, citing that he lost his Ivorian nationality upon acquiring French citizenship in 1987. Tahim, who recently won his party's primary without opposition, had been considered a key contender against incumbent President Alassane Ouattara in the upcoming October elections. The court ruled in favor of his petitioner seeking his removal from the electoral roll, with no counter-appeal filed in Tahim's legal team. This follows a previous rejection by the Independent Electoral Commission on April 16th of 10 similar appeals, which were found admissible by is admissible but ill-founded. However, the court's latest decision overruled those findings, emphasizing the legal consequences of Thiam's naturalization. Ivory Coast's political environment remains fragile after the 2020 elections, which was marked by violence and a widespread boycott from opposition parties. The disqualification of a prominent opposition figure may further influence the electoral landscape. Just before we end the news, a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. Pastor Chris warns against plans to restrict the preaching of the gospel in public. Federal Trade Court upholds Trump tariffs in initial ruling. New Mexico Supreme Court bans former judge following arrest of alleged gang member at his home. Virginia Town Council reinstates police department following public opposition. Treasury Secretary signals U.S.-China tariff deal possible if Beijing rebalances economy. And that's news for today. Join us at the same time tomorrow for more news. I'm Barbara Sam. Good night and God bless you.